craziness. Testing, 1, 2.
You've been in a work session, and we are now convening to regular session. So the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would please stand and join me. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item number 5, Superintendent's Presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin. We have another exciting presentation this evening. We have tried to do our best to recognize people in our organization throughout this time on some of the amazing work that our folks have been doing. We have so many new and difficult circumstances that our staff has already addressed from March to now. And so we want to make sure that we are recognizing the leaders in our district that are working hard behind the scenes at times and sometimes out front, even out front of MI, handing out food to kids throughout the entire March and all the things that happen through the spring. So I want to invite Todd Petrie up. He's our Chief Operations Officer. And Todd Petrie, if you would go ahead and get our presentation started, and then I'll come up and help you as it goes.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Cooper, for the opportunity to recognize our nutrition department this evening. And before I bring up our esteemed nutrition director, I wanted to say a few things myself. To my right, you could all raise your hand, our nutrition leaders of the district. If you could raise your hands for everyone. I want everyone at home to see who you are. It's all of you.
That's right.
We could give them a round of applause. These are the folks that each and every day have the opportunity to serve over 10,000 students. Some of them work in our business offices. Some of them are the leaders in our cafeterias. They do amazing work. And I tell you, when the pandemic started in early spring, I can remember one of the first meetings we had. Tanya was there, Tracy was there, Tamara, Mark Merzanowski. And we worked through a plan of how we were going to deliver meals in 5 different locations throughout the Mason City School District. But what I didn't realize on that day was the amount of change that would take place to this group of people over the next 7 to 8 months. And I have to tell you, when this started out, all the kids were at home. We had what we call mobile meals. Then we went to 50% of the kids in school, 50% of the kids at home, 70% of the kids in school, 30% of the kids at home. And through each of those, this group of leaders has shown great flexibility, just the innovation of how they adapted to those situations. For example, it would have been really simple for these folks to just package meals each and every day. But they took that extra step to make sure that every time that they were handing out meals, there was a hot meal for the whole family, which is something that, to me meant a lot. And I think the best compliment any educator, particularly a leader, can get is to say that each and every day those people did what they could do for 100% of the students. And I have to say, just watching all of you and what you did every day, it was every one of the kids. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our nutrition director. And I've had the opportunity to work with Ms. Tamara Earl for the past 4 years. And I've worked with a lot of leaders. And I tell you, Tamara has built a culture in the nutrition department of compassion, care, and innovation. The way that she does things and the way that she cares for her people, it is displayed in how people treat our students. So without further ado, I would like to present a certificate of appreciation to Ms. Tamara Earl.
Thank you, Todd, and President Galvin, and members of the board, Superintendent Cooper, and members of the executive committee. It is an honor to be here this evening and to recognize the Child Nutrition Department, including the managers that are here and the members of the Child Nutrition Office, who I fondly call the A-team. And that became quite a term we used almost daily.
Because you were driving around town, jumping in and out of vans in emergency situations. That's pretty apt.
That's right. So this group and this department has faced a lot of challenges, and I'll say not just since the pandemic, I'm going to say over the last 3 years, it's been a lot of challenges. But particularly, they demonstrated courage. You were willing to put yourself on the front lines so that we could deliver mobile meals, which was a change with the pandemic and something this department had never done. You willingly loaded hundreds of meals on buses, and we learned that's hard. As well as how many half gallons of milk. I figured at least 3,500 in the spring. And of course, we did about 28,000 meals in the spring mobily as well. And then, of course, the school year started. And then the USDA waiver came with the allowance for every student to have one free meal and breakfast and lunch. So this group of people had to lead their teams with another change. And as a result, our breakfast participation since the start of the school year has increased 330%. And our lunch participation in meals has increased by 42% from the start of the school year. Now, in addition, we have 2 kitchen sites that are preparing mobile meals for our families who are learning at home or online. And they're right now fixing about 1,250 breakfasts and 1,250 lunches weekly. And of course, then we have mobile distribution, whether it's rain, sunshine, sleet, or snow, which we are working on our plans to protect us better. So basically, I hope that kind of gives you an overview of the many changes that you have worked through. And I've often said, I'm very confident that I have the best managers in the state of Ohio in this department. And I want to say you have all done your work with excellence, and you have all done your work with compassion, not just for students, but for leading teams. So I continue to stand with you, and I applaud you for your commitment and service to the families and students of Mason City Schools. Thank you.
I'll hand them if you want to call them up. Is that all right?
Cameron, can I ask you to go to the mic? That way we can hear voices, names, and then we'll have people just start filling in like space. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, Sarah Burkhart. Tim Alpers. Steve McBride. Sue McClevitt. Mr. Mark Prater. Stephanie Reynolds. Jennifer Sight. Kathy Thompson. And last but not least, Teresa Todd.
I'm just sneaking right behind here. Let's see if we can have, yes. Sue,
Yep.
can you come down here? Yep, that's great. And then Tamara.
I'll give you some more height, yeah.
Yeah. You know what, Mark, I can have you, come this way, yeah. 1, 2, 3. One more, 1, 2, 3. Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, before everybody leaves, we did want to make just a couple of comments and express as a board, our appreciation for what you do. I'll kick it off before I pass the mic. I remember when we were having that first kind of war room meeting that coincided with one of our work sessions. It was when we heard that we were getting ready to shut down schools, and back in March. One of the very first conversations I think we had as far as what the new transition would look like and some of the different functions of our departments and things, and getting meals to families, especially those on free and reduced lunch and breakfast plans, were one of the, if not the first concern. It was one of the top 2 or 3, I think. And to see you all mobilize and transition to this unprecedented role in your department has just been exemplary. It's been something that I think has set a tone for our whole district, and something that we're all very appreciative of and grateful for. And it's just, we thank you for making that change.
One of the things that I think happened at the beginning of the pandemic was that the world started to see exactly what it is that schools do, right? And exactly how many and the wide breadth of facets of students and families' lives that schools meet every single day without people even noticing. I've said it before. I certainly hope it remains true that will never change. We will have had a newfound appreciation from the public, from leaders, from everybody about just what it is you do. But if I think back to really just the trenches of it, when this all happened, I was touched at, just even for myself, starting to see the service that you all provide every day for our students in a way that I hadn't before, because it doesn't quite click for you in just kind of everyday kind of learning environment, just how vital the service that you provide for our students. I mean, we're literally talking about the food they eat, right? And without school, there are a lot of things that we were trying to meet, needs that we were trying to meet. We of course want to meet the educational needs, but you guys met the needs of families for food in an emergency situation. And talk about the front line. I mean, you were inspiring, and you were out there in front when a lot of other people were doing a lot of work behind the scenes and in front of a camera, right? Or on Zoom. You guys were out there in your vans, the A-team for real, So you've always inspired us, but this has taken us to a different level, and we're so lucky to have you, and we're so thankful to have you leading us in this such important work. So congratulations. Well-deserved honor.
Tamara, I remember a while back when you were not the top leader, but you were well on your way. Your handpicked your predecessor identified you, and as I watched you grow and on your own pursue the training, the information, and the experience that you needed to do a top-notch job for our kids. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun to watch you through your career here grow. And it's folks like you that make this not a school district, but it makes us a family. And my utmost gratitude to you and your staff. I know that you're highly regarded by them, and it's well deserved. So thanks for working together and doing what you do every day for our families.
I just want to let you all know that the adjust and adapt, concept really spilled over into your world when this happened, and your ability, my goodness, to do what you did. And we know that you can't teach a child if they have an empty stomach, and that is so important. You got to meet their basic needs before you can even think about educating them. So thank you for what you do. It's such an important job, and the care that you gave, to the kids and their family, that'll be remembered forever.
Thank you all. We really appreciate it. And again, this is, one of the initial highest and most essential needs that we had to face and figure out, when we're shutting the buildings down, and kids that are, sometimes this is their only, source of a consistent meal, being able to come in and get that. And it just, it was great to see us be able to rely on you and trust in, you guys getting the job done regardless of the circumstances. So,
And here's hoping for the rest of the year that you guys could coast and just do your easy everyday job from before without huge changes, right? Can only hope.
Yeah.
Another round of applause.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all. And I know that there's so much more that we could say about all the things you do behind the scenes, but we're so grateful for all of you. So thank you. Appreciate it. You're welcome to go this time, or you can stay after this meeting. We'll leave that up to you. We'll take a quick pause here.
John will not be offended.
People, like, I think about the lunch lady when I was in school. It's a beautiful set of people. Our kids are lucky. Yes, am I right? Isn't it true? We didn't have anybody look this good.
All right. Our next item on our
Sean, you might just want to stall for.
Several, in fact.
Normally, this is the part of the program where I sing a song and we wait
for the
That
5-year
sounds
forecast.
amazing right
while
now.
we wait for the forecast to come up. I usually sing, but I will. So briefly, we wanted to take tonight to take a few minutes to kind of talk through the 5-year forecast. As everybody knows, twice a year we do approve the 5-year forecast and submit it to the Department of Education. But before I get into some of the details, I just wanted to mention for anybody who's watching tonight, this is not the only time that we talk about the forecast and look at it. We use it really all throughout the year as a planning tool. It guides us in a lot of decisions that we make around the district, and it's a very valuable piece of information that we use. The other thing I will mention that in terms of process, again, tonight is not the only time that we look at it or approve it. This is actually the culmination of several weeks worth of work. It starts out with the Finance Committee several weeks ago, and this is the process that we use both spring and fall. The Finance Committee will meet and look through the forecast and all the details and the assumptions and kind of work through some of the key assumptions. We kind of go back and forth and tweak and edit and make sure we're all on the same page. Once that process is complete, then we bring it to the full board for a work session. We do the same thing in there. We review all the details of the assumptions and make sure that we all understand them. We're all on the same page. And then tonight is kind of the culmination of that, where we officially put it on the agenda for approval. So there is a long process that we go through to get to this point. So we'll take a few minutes. Again, we're not going to go through every piece of the forecast, but kind of wanted to look at a few financial highlights, some of the things that make up the forecast. So again, the forecast, if you actually pull up the document, for anybody, again, who's watching or watches it later, it's actually in board docs. There's the full 5-year forecast, gives you 3 years of history and 5 years of future data. So the first part is obviously the revenue side of the ledger, and we'll take a look at that. So in terms of revenues, what you see on this pie graph here is about 83% of our revenues come from either local property taxes or state foundation funding. That actually is going to be a similar picture that you're going to see really in any school district around Ohio. Local property taxes and state foundation funding are going to be the true primary sources of revenue. It's not always going to be the same in terms of breakdown. Some school districts might have, instead of having 52% real estate, they might have 80% or they might have 10%. There's really varies, but that's kind of our breakdown at the moment. When you look at property values, so property values and the types of property values we have is what drives our local property taxes and the revenues we receive there. So if you look at this breakdown, 78% of our current property value comes from residential value, which is homes, and we have about 20% of commercial value. We'll talk more about that section here in a couple minutes, some history there, but that's where we're at the moment. Next thing I want to talk about is, again, the operating levy that was passed back in the spring. We're very grateful to the community that came out and supported us in the spring. We had 69% of our voters vote in favor of passing this levy. It really is, local property taxes, again, are the lifeline of the school district and the foundation on which we stand. So again, we're very grateful for that. One thing I will kind of point out here is that, get my highlighter to work. Well, never mind. I can see it on the wall, but not on the screen. So what I was going to point out was that, again, we're in 2020 was when the levy passed, and you kind of see that phased-in approach for a couple of reasons. One, it was a phased-in levy, adding 4.71 mils in tax year 20. We'll start collecting that in 21. Then the second 5.25 mils coming on in 21. We start collecting that in 22. And so you kind of see a ramp up period there. And I'll talk more about that ramp up here later in the agenda. But one of the things I did want to mention tonight was that just kind of reiterating to our community that the first 4.71 mils will cost a little bit less than $14 per month for 100,000 of value. The second 5.25 mils actually will not be an increase in cost on the tax bill for our community members, our homeowners. And the reason for that is we have some bond millage just dropping off at the same time at the same rate. So they're going to see an increase in that first year in 21, but in 22, when they go to pay their tax bill in 22, they will not see an increase in that because of that bond millage dropping off. So I know that that was something we talked a lot about in the spring, but just kind of wanted to reiterate that and make sure people understood that regardless of COVID, regardless of all the impacts we have, there's been no change in that plan. That plan is still good and still in place, and that's still what we're moving forward with. Next section, TPP. So TPP is something we've talked about ad nauseum for the last several years. And the reason I wanted to bring it up tonight is that this is the first fiscal year that we're down to $0 of revenue from our TPP. So I wanted to kind of take a walk back memory lane here. The TPP tax was actually something that was in place in Ohio for over 100 years. And it was a key source of revenue for a lot of school districts, Mason included. Back in 2005, the Ohio General Assembly passed House Bill 66, and there was a lot of tax reform in that bill. One of those was to get rid of the TPP tax and replace it with a commercial activity tax. The TPP tax was a local property tax, much like what our homeowners and businesses pay here in the community now. It was another form of that local tax at the time and had been for a lot of years. This CAT tax that replaced it is actually a different form of a tax. It's actually sent directly to the state. So it's no longer a local tax, it's now a state tax. And if you move to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about the impact on that. and why that's important. So these three pie charts are three different years of the same thing. So the top left, you see 2005, and obviously the thing you see on there that you don't see anywhere else is a chunk of yellow. That chunk of yellow was the property value that came from tangible personal property in our community. And again, the tangible personal property was a business tax paid for primarily for equipment and inventory of companies in our area. So 12% of our total property value was from tangible personal property. And so what that resulted in the rest of the pie was that you can see only 71% of our total value was from residential at the time, in part because of that 12%. After the state eliminated that and we kind of phased that out, you can fast forward to 2019, the top right part, and see that there's no longer that 12% TPP, which had an impact on our residential. So now we're at 82% residential. Again, just the impacts of what we saw at the state level with the elimination of that TPP. And so the bottom right one, the reason I put that one up there is that in spite of the results of the state, the General Assembly and the work that they did with the TPP, eliminating that key source of revenue for us, we have seen, and even in the last year, we've seen some shift from residential more towards commercial. And you see our current year is we're actually 78% down slightly from 82% last year. And just a kudos to our local partners, the City of Mason, Deerfield Township. We work with them on a regular basis on any kind of economic development projects. Again, that's something the Finance Committee reviews, the board reviews. And so we do appreciate their partnership and support in trying to bring in as many commercial partners as we can to help support the local community. And that's, again, something we appreciate. And so, but in spite of that, we're still not to the point where we were even back in 2005, where we had only 71% of our value came from homeowners. Next slide. This actually looks at the revenue, the dollar part of our revenues, not just the property value. So this is 2005 versus 2020. On the left-hand side, again, you'll see that bright yellow piece of the pie that's gone in 2020. So back in 2005, that again was our TPP revenues. That was of our total revenue. It was about 14% of our total budget. Real estate at that time was only 42%. State funding was 36%. Fast forward again, the yellow piece of the pie is gone. That real estate number has now jumped up to 52%. So we're 10% higher than we were, before the TPP change. And state funding is 31%. So local share has gone up 10%. State share has gone down 5%. And this is actually before the full impact of this next iteration of the operating levy that we have. Once you see that fully phased in the next few years, I actually expect that 52% to jump up over 60, as this because of the impact of state funding or the lack thereof that we get. We can continue to see that burden shifting from Columbus to the local community. And it's one of the reasons that we lobby on a regular basis. I know Mr. Cooper does a great job of always updating us on conversations that we've been having with senators and representatives and trying to make sure that our voices are heard at the table when they're talking about funding and funding decisions that they're making at the state level, because those do have an impact on our local community and the taxpayers we have here. Shifting over to the expense side of the ledger. Again, this pie chart is something that you're going to see pretty similarly in any school district around the state. For Mason, about 85% of our budget is people. That's not a surprise. Again, that's a common trend just because we are a service business. We don't have inventory. We don't produce machines or equipment or those types of things. We serve kids and people. So 85% of our budget is spent on salaries and benefits. And then this slide actually kind of mentions some of the other categories. So again, 85% is people. We have over 1,100 regular staff members in the district. Our staffing expenses are really a function of a couple things. One is staffing levels, and the second is the negotiated agreements that we have in place at the time. And so the negotiated agreements we have right now expire June next year. And so we'll be renewing those, and that will be a key factor in our ongoing operating costs. The next category is purchase services. That's about 10%. So that's student and special needs. It could be OT, PT, speech, any kind of services that we pay for and provide for our kids. Safety and security is another piece in there. Contracted custodial services, and then our utilities. So those two categories, the first two, make up about 95% of the budget. Moving on down the line, supplies and materials, instructional supplies, those kinds of things, we're at 3%. The next line, you'll see capital is actually in there at 0%. That might be a funny number to look at and say, well, how do we spend 0%? We have 1.6 million square feet in our district. How do we spend 0% of our budget on capital? And that's actually because we have a separate fund. We have a capital improvement fund or permanent improvement fund that has been funded historically through economic development dollars. Again, thanks to City of Mason and Deerfield Township and their partnerships, we've used economic development revenues, pilot payments, and things to fund those capital needs, and that's really allowed us to not spend our general fund dollars on those types of things. But one of the things I will pause here and say is that as our buildings continue to age, so MI is over 20 years old. The original building we're sitting in here at the high school is 20 years old. MECC is almost 15 years old now. We're going to get to the point here in the next 5 to 10 years where our capital needs are probably going to be greater. And so that's something we'll probably be talking more about in the next few years, and might be thinking about some creative ways to address those. I'll also pause here and say thanks to Mr. Petrie. He does a great job at planning for those, looking 5 to 10 years out, and always making sure that we're on top of those needs.
And in fact, one thing that we've started is we have a forecast. We use this tool to look at capital expenditures and look at that balance in that fund too, even though that's not the technically state mandated format.
Yep, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that we do have a separate forecast for that capital fund, and that's something that the facility committee looks at, the finance committee looks at, and it's also an important part of our planning. Next thing I wanted to address, we do get a fair amount of questions on this, as really any company probably in America is getting, or across the world. What's the impact of COVID on us financially? We know the impact of COVID in a lot of ways. Operationally, we have the option 1 and option 2 students. We know about the cleaning that we're doing, and the work that our child nutrition staff and custodial staff and other people are doing. But in terms of finances, I wanted to give a little bit of information about what we're seeing in terms of the budget numbers here. Again, breaking this down in terms of increased expenses and revenue losses. You'll see on the right-hand side, really our biggest impact has been revenue losses to date. The state foundation funding, we saw a reduction in state funding back in the spring. They're also funding us at a reduced level for this year. So that's been our biggest loss at this point, over $2 million each year in state funding cuts. We're also seeing a reduction in state casino revenues, not surprisingly, just because during the pandemic, when buildings were shut down, nobody was going to the casinos, and so there was a reduction in revenue there. Investment and interest revenue, again, interest rates obviously fell through the floor, and so that was an important revenue source for us, and that's really dropped significantly, and we expect that to continue into the near future. Some of these other areas, extracurricular spectators, facility rental, extended care and enrichment, preschool tuition, these are all things that have been impacted, whether it's not being able to have spectators at games, or just the space requirements that we needed for extended care or the preschool program. All those things have revenue impacts for us. And so the total net revenue loss we're looking at so far is about $5 million. And on the expense side, we have seen an uptick in expenses, things like PPE, cleaning supplies, the remote learning software, the school's PLP and Apex, and then technology to help support those things. So all told, right now, we're at about $6 million. But I will say this, that I don't anticipate that we're done in that category. If you flip to the next slide, Tracy, there's some things that we still anticipate could happen in the future. So for example, sometimes in schools, and we saw this back in 2008 with the economic crisis, there's a lagging impact on how what we see in the economy, and then what actually ends up playing forward when it comes to schools or government entities. And so we anticipate that could happen here with the school district. And so here's a few examples of things that we could continue to see into the future. One of those is increases in delinquency rates. So on this one, for example, again, over half our revenue comes from local property taxes. If you just take residential as an example, back in the spring when COVID hit, you might say that a lot of homeowners had their property taxes escrowed, and by the time COVID hit, maybe those escrow accounts were fully funded or pretty close to it. So when they use those escrow accounts to pay their fall property tax bill. So there was maybe not an immediate effect on that, but we might see that going forward. If you have a savings account at home and somebody's unemployed, that savings account may eventually run out, or maybe your escrow account is no longer fully funded. Those are the kinds of things that we might see a year from now or 2 years from now as a lagging impact of COVID. Another thing we might see is lagging is a decrease in property values for commercial entities. We know that the housing market right now is booming, so we're not expecting any decreases in property values there. However, when it comes to commercial office space, hotels, those kinds of things that have been impacted by COVID, we could see a lagging impact on those property values going into the future. Another thing, again, the interest revenues.
Hey, Sean, can you explain that a little bit? Because we spent a lot of time talking about how the inverse isn't true, that when your property values go up as a homeowner, that doesn't mean you are paying more to the schools. Can you flesh
Sure.
that out a little bit? Just
So on commercial values, there's really the main way that could be affected is primarily be on the inside millage. But the reason that they're significant is that when you take a multi-million-dollar property, if that goes down in value, it's obviously a lot bigger than it is on $200,000 house. And so you're talking about a lot bigger dollar amounts. And then when you apply the inside millage, it does not have the House Bill 920 rollback or reverse effect. We could see some revenue losses from that. So you're right. It would not be necessarily be a dollar for dollar, but it could still be an impact.
You would see the same effect on a personal property. It's just that the value is comparatively lower, and so the impact to us isn't as great as a big commercial piece of property.
And the millage too, right? There's a difference in how the millage is treated.
Yeah. So on the voted millage, again, with the House Bill, so you kind of have House Bill 920 going on here. If property values go up, the millage rate goes down. If property values go down, the millage rate goes up. And so that's why I say it's not a true dollar for dollar impact. If a hotel that's worth $10 million drops to $1 million, we're not going to see the full loss of that. However, we would see the full loss on our inside millage as opposed to our voted millage. So it wouldn't be a full dollar of the full loss, but we could see some losses there, especially just because we're talking millions of dollars as opposed to a couple $100,000 for a house. Good question. And then the last thing we mentioned, the interest revenues. Again, we've already seen a decrease there, and we expect that to continue into the next couple of years, as the Federal Reserve has kind of indicated that they're keeping interest rates near zero for the next 2 to 3 years. So we do expect that those revenue losses to continue there as well. If you look overall, there's a graph here I wanted to take a brief look at. This, the black and the gray lines are our revenues and expenses, and the yellow line across there is our cash balances. So if you look at 2020, this is obviously has the impact of the levy in there. If we had not had the impact of the levy, a year ago we looked at this same graph and we actually had that yellow line going down pretty quickly, and so it went down even below zero. Obviously, that's the need for the operating levy, and again, we're extremely grateful for the support of our community, which has kind of stabilized that line to where we are in a more a solid cash position. One of the things I will mention, though, is that as you look at this, again, as the board knows, one of our key metrics we look at is 20% of our operating budget we'd like to have in a cash reserve. And so partly because of COVID, really, we never hit that 20% number. So we are in a much more stable financial position than we were a year ago. But I will say that because of that, we're not seeing the full 20% that we would have seen otherwise. So for example, and then what I mean by that is if you look out and say 2024, 2025, you see that our cash balance is around $20 million. The full 20% number would have pushed that up to maybe 28 million or so. And so we're still not hitting our target. We're in a lot better position than we were a year ago, but we're still slightly behind. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that obviously, careful financial planning and monitoring will be required as we go forward. And definitely something that we're aware of and are watching. And so, again, in a lot better position than we were a year ago, but something we would need to continue to carefully monitor in the coming years to make sure that we're still following through with the commitment we made back in the spring to make sure that this operating levy lasts at least 5 years. And so that commitment is still there. That's still our goal. And so we'll be working hard to make that happen. The last thing I had was just in terms of academically and where the school's at, a bit of good news there. We moved up one spot. When you're number 5 in the state, it's hard to make a lot of progress, but we did move up 1 spot to number 4. So congratulations to all the staff, all the families out there who have been working hard. And so that's good news. Second piece of good news there is that we are providing that number 4 ranking at a cost that's below the state average. So again, appreciate the hard work of our staff and our students and families. And we'll continue moving forward and monitoring COVID and keeping you guys updated on the impacts that we're seeing. So any questions?
Thanks, Sean. I had just a couple of questions. I think a lot of folks have heard about the CARES Act and funding that has come from that to, all different kinds of entities, whether it's, people got stimulus checks to their households, businesses received loans or grants, local governments have gotten CARES Act funding. As far as school districts and Mason in particular, what has CARES Act funding look like, in the form of relief that we've received and that we can expect in the short term to intermediate future?
Yep, no, that's a great question. And that's actually goes back to conceptually, every school district obviously is going to be treated a little bit differently in terms of whether it's the amount of local property taxes they have versus the state, or the amount of commercial tax they have versus residential. Every district has a little bit different split, and those kinds of things come into play when you talk about CARES Act funding, whether it's federal or state. And I've heard stories of some districts who actually received more CARES Act funding than they had increases in expenses. So financially, they actually came out ahead through COVID and through the CARES Act funding. That clearly was not the case with us as we looked at that one slide. To answer your question directly, we received 2 different pieces of funding. One we received from the federal government from the CARES Act funding. One we received from the state. It was part of their CARES Act allocation. We received it. So together it was about $680,000. And that number was netted out in that $5 million revenue number I mentioned. So that number was already in there to offset that. So without that, it would have been closer to $6 million of revenue loss. And so our net revenue loss after that CARES Act funding was still about $5 million.
The second half of your question is that we don't expect any more assistance.
Yeah, at this point, we're not expecting any more, right?
Right, and that dovetails too, and I think you mentioned it earlier, but just bringing back, we've got it 680,000 from the CARES Act. What did we, just from the state's funding formula, we cut back last spring, and then going into this year, we were told we need to cut. How much have we so far been cut from our budget from the state?
Yeah, another good question. So we received a one-time, with the CARES Act, we received a one-time payment of about $680,000. The state revenue loss in the spring was $2.1 million, and the same $2.1 million was of revenue loss this year. So we're at a total of about $4.2 million revenue loss from the state, with about a $680,000 revenue offset from the CARES Act funding.
And then as far as this year, obviously we've had some unique circumstances. Some of the ways that we operate, we have families that are learning online. We have families that are learning in person in school. For the broader community wondering, well, hey, fewer kids in the buildings, maybe that leads to lower costs and things. Can you touch on how that impacts our operating costs and
Sure.
whether there's any impact there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had an uptick in costs really in various areas, and we're still kind of early in the year. Some of the increase in costs we anticipate for the rest of the year are still a little bit unknown at this point. And by the ones that are unknown, I'm talking about specifically sub costs for the rest of the year. I mean, what's that going to be? When we hit the winter and the spring, are we going to see a further uptick in sub costs? But the ones that we know for now that we're already seeing are really primarily in the area of the software that we're providing for the option 2 students. That was in excess of a $300,000 expense for the year. The other area we've seen a lot of increase in is just our cleaning supplies, our hand sanitizer. Todd could probably tell you how many thousands of gallons of hand sanitizer we bought this year. But in terms of costs for the plexiglass dividers and the cleaning supplies and all those things, we're close to $700,000 on those. So really, those are our 2 primary costs that we've seen go up: the $700,000 for cleaning supplies and hand sanitizer and all that, and the $300,000 for the software. So definitely have seen our costs go up already, and obviously we're only into October, so we still have a long way to go for the rest of the year to see how the rest of the year plays out in terms of cost.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Sean, could you just, I mean, it may be, pretty obvious, but just touch on the idea that the cut in funding from the state, a lot of other businesses took big hits, but they, immediately had to make choices on the expense side, and the structure allowed them to, unfortunately for many employees, make decisions about staffing, right? Immediate decisions about staffing to offset the lost revenue that was coming in. For many different reasons, we don't have that available to us, but for even more reasons, we didn't make a decision to cut staffing and to make up for that. So that's just kind of a unique piece of planning through a crisis like this, where we obviously don't get a say in the funding, the cut of our funding. But we also, we have a community that had just made an investment in the way that the things look in our classroom, right? The way we do education in Mason, and talk about a gut punch of the pandemic happening right as that decision was being made. But the reality is that rightfully we didn't make decisions to make changes in staffing, but there is this reality of at least this $4.2 million hit in our financial picture that will be there, that impacts decisions that we have to make going through. So I'm not sure if that's a question, but it's a piece that just is part of all of this. Yeah,
that's a great point. Well, even going back to the spring, you are right that probably a lot of companies out there, if they restaurants or whatnot, the first thing that might have, when they got shut down, the first thing they might have done is said, okay, we're laying off as many staff as we can. We're going to move forward and try to eliminate that cost. For us, and we work closely with school districts, all around the state, and make sure that we're, collecting all the data that we have and have the latest information, whether it's from, other the local community, or other places across the state, or legislators, or what kinds of things are going on. But one of the things I will say is, back in the spring, when we got sent home on Friday the 13th, we didn't know at that time how long the quarantine was going to be. And so there was always this, okay, we're not going to be in person right now, but you're still going to teach your students, and you have to be ready to go. And so those were really the kind of the 2 things we were operating around, was making sure that we were still serving our kids and our families. Child Nutrition Department, as you heard, was even serving meals to homes. And so really operations did not stop, for the school district back in the spring. And on top of that, we always had to be ready for kids to come back in the building. And so there really was never a time, really, until we got into May, before the governor said, okay, we're going to be at home the rest of the school year. And even once he said that, we still knew that we still had to serve kids and families. And so that we really didn't have the option to completely take a big reduction in staffing, because we were still providing the same services that we had been providing. We were just doing it a little bit differently. And so going forward, obviously with 85% of our budget being people, when we talk about managing our costs and working together to make sure that we're making this levy last 5 years, that is the number one, factor. And so that's something that we're gonna have to work closely with our staff and our unions in the spring and the summer to make sure that we're working together on that, to make sure that we can, again, extend this levy to at least the 5-year commitment that we made to our community.
Yeah.
And that is a big factor.
and the commitment that we made to the community that in making that decision to make that investment, they were investing in the way that we do education in Mason today, which requires our level of staffing and our dedicated staff, right? And so that is guiding what we do, and that is our focus, of keeping that and finding ways to deal with hits like that.
Sure.
But to be able to keep that, right? So.
And again, to your point, one of the ways that school districts are different is that, again, if you think of a restaurant or a hotel or something, you might have gone from, 90 to 100% capacity down to 10% capacity. And again, for the schools, we'd really never had that moment where we went from 90 to 100% capacity down to 10%. We were, even from the get-go, we were, educating students in remote learning and going to a different style of learning than we had before. But there really was never a time where we completely shut down our operations. And so being a service business, staffing is a key part of that, and we couldn't do it without the staff that we have. So, good questions.
Any other questions, comments for Sean? I'll just add that we continue to monitor and appreciate your helping us spot trends and identify what's going to be a short-term hit and what is more likely to stay for the long run, and what we need to incorporate beyond just one or two years for budgeting purposes. Hopefully we will be back to a normal style of learning and what we're accustomed to sooner than later, but in the meantime we continue to adapt and adjust to what we've got. So
Thank you.
thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. Item number 6, the next item on our agenda is the hearing of the public. We have a few participants tonight, so I will go ahead and just for a refresher of this portion of our meeting, community participation at a board meeting is limited to the hearing of the public portion of the meeting. We don't deliberate or decide any issues during this portion. Each person's allotted 3 minutes until the total time is used. If you hear our treasurer give you the hook here, that's just letting you know that the 3 minutes that you've been allotted is up. And we also require a couple of things for people who are participating in this session, primarily that they are a resident of the district. And we ask that you identify yourself along with your address when you come up to the podium. Additionally, no complaints and using specific employee names or other private student information is disclosed during this time. So with that, our first speaker tonight is, I'm going to mess this one up, I'm sorry. Charmaine Garwin. I apologize if I've mispronounced that.
Hello everyone, how are you? My name is Shaimat Garwin. I live in 3731 White Way, Mesa. I'm here to talk about the online learning that I was part of it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my experience as a Mason mom for 4 kids who were enrolled in online learning. My goal coming here to talk to you today is to provide feedback in order to improve next year's learning experience for students across the district, since I have a feeling that we're gonna stay like this for another year or 2. This semester, myself and other Mason parents felt a burden had been put on us to take most, if not full, responsibility of our children's online learning education. With little to no instructions from the teachers, especially for older age group. I have a junior and middle schooler. Our kids were left to basically self-teach. Self-teaching shouldn't be a normal thing. This was new for the kids, and to self-teach most of their material with the short Zoom calls with their teachers is just unacceptable. As far as the older kids at the middle school and high school level, there were continuous changes in the platform usage and not enough resources to meet students' needs. The elementary and intermediate teachers were overwhelmed with the amount of students in their classes, causing continuous schedule changes and following up with their missing work. The feeling of isolation among my kids was high, despite all the efforts being put by the administrations and and parents. When choosing our children's learning option at the beginning of the year, we were informed that whatever option we choose can be switched for next semester. But it was strongly advised in the email sent to us about the second semester switch to keep our children where they are, and this made our decision even harder than it already was, and gave us a sense of guilt if we decided to make the switch. I chose online for my kids to create a stable learning environment, and that didn't turn out to be the case. Our district is unique and very big and very diverse, and I'm aware of the challenges that the district face, but I'm confident that with the more parent involvement, things can get better and we can be a role model for all the districts around us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Joy Bennett.
Hi, I'm Joy Bennett, 1054 Willow Lane. I'm here to talk about online learning as well. First, I wanted to say thank you for embracing the opportunity to deliver online learning. I personally was very relieved to have a choice. And I had confidence that you would deliver a well-researched decision on how to do this, and that it would be the same level of quality that we're used to seeing in traditional learning. I want to give a little bit of background and share a little bit with you from the perspective of families who are in online learning. Back in July, when we learned that we would have two options and we decided to go online, I knew that I needed to connect with other people doing the same thing. This was completely foreign territory for all of us. And having some connection, some family support, I knew was going to be really important. So I started a Facebook group and figured a few dozen people would join. In a week, we had 800 people, and now I have 1,150 parents and staff in this Facebook group who are either delivering or supporting online learning for their children. So I must have hit a nerve. It's been really cool. I've had a number of volunteers step up. There's 16 of us now who are moderating the group. We divided into subgroups because very quickly we could tell by the conversation and the questions, families wanted to connect with others in the same grade. They wanted to still get their kids connected, whether it was through very small, pod learning or social gatherings. They still wanted to be connected. So we now have 12 groups, one massive one for everyone, 10 grade specific groups. We put the high school all together, and one group for IEP families. It is, for the most part, a really beautiful example of how families and people pull together in the middle of a crisis like this. At approximately a quarter in, I do want to share some feedback from our side of the screen. It's unique, and I know that as people who are delivering from your end, there's no way to know what the experience is like on our side. So day to day, we've done some of our own polling and just reading all of the feedback. Day to day, when it comes to lessons and teaching, most of the families say everything's okay. They have a lot of ideas for how it can be better, and many recommendations that extend beyond video calls and online quizzes. So I wanted to share some of the themes that we're hearing. The first one is we want to feel included and a part of the school district, and we really don't right now. We feel forgotten or like an afterthought. One mom told me today, it almost feels like we're going to a completely different school. And we really want to see proactive outreach to all of us. Assume we want to be included. Share stories. The principal's emails each week need to include online learners. Stories like that.
That's 3 minutes.
Could you wrap up those other themes real quickly? And
Okay,
then we'll
I'll
move
just
on.
list them then.
Okay.
We're concerned about the staffing of classes and class sizes. There's a lot of students per teacher, which means personalized learning can't happen. The content being delivered on the school's PLP platform is not memorable or engaging. So our kids are just like spitting stuff out and then forgetting it. We all, teachers and parents and students, need more training on the software. The challenges technologically continue. They obviously were huge at the beginning, but there's still ongoing challenges. And we feel like the district's energy and resources trend towards the in-person experience. And we would really like to see you work on incorporating the big rocks into online learning as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deepam Nair.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to address the board. I'm Deepam Nair, 7814 Golden Meadow, Mason, and I'm the mom of a freshman in Mason High School who has chosen the online option offered by the school district. I come here today to offer a perspective from a parent who has had a ringside view of the educational experience my daughter has gone through these last 2 months. I think I echo the same concerns that Shaima and Joy before me have just experienced. It has been challenging both for students, teachers, and parents. Given that this is the new normal for 25% of the students, I would like to make sure that the educational offering is equitable when compared to in-school students. One, the face time allocated with teachers falls far short of what an in-person student gets. This has been acknowledged by the administration. It just takes some amount of time and data that you collect, and you can see the average times that an online student actually can be face-to-face with a teacher. Two, the gaps in the educational offerings. Electives have no teacher support. This is especially glaring in foreign languages. The school administration has started making changes, and I request that the changes continue to be made till it is comparable to an in-school offering. I do not think that Mason, as a school district with the quality that it touts itself for, can afford to have where 25% of the students actually have an experience that is not comparable to the 75% in school. The second one that I did want to raise is a gap. That is like for science classes, there is no lab work that is associated for in-school online students. It's a gap that parents cannot meet, that the online provider cannot meet. And maybe the school district should look at like creating maybe lab classes for online students so that they are ready when they come in back to in school to actually learn and not miss that crucial education. The voluntary RLE students, I just learned, have the ability to go to school for labs, and I request that this feature be extended to online students. The school administration has been very supportive in listening to the concerns raised by the parents, and I appreciate the time and the effort the teachers and the administration have put in listening to us. I've had at least 2 conversations with Mr. Cooper, Ms. Shauna Miller, and so I have to appreciate the listening opportunities that they give. What I would like to ask for is that since this is new for both students, teachers, and parents, that there's a conscious effort to continue to gather open-ended feedback using community conversations to learn and improve the experience. I think we all acknowledge that there's several areas for improvement, and unless there is active participation from the administration, the parents, that this is going to result in a subpar educational experience for online students. I want to close this by really appreciating the time and effort that teachers have put in learning a new platform. Teaching students very often to black screens, I see the impact. I really do appreciate the effort that the teachers put in educating our students. The administration, I would like to thank Ms. Shana Miller, who has been so closely involved in getting the online platform working. She has been awesome. So I do want to make sure that, we appreciate the effort that the administration is putting. I would ask for it to be continued, and so that we just get to a point where this is really equitable for online students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes our public hearing portion. We typically save board commentary for the end of our meeting. Given that we've got sort of a common theme here, I will just address some things briefly here for those, so that in the interest of your evening, if you would like to move on and not wait until the bitter end after the resolutions and things that we pass, you can do so. First and foremost, we recognize that the offerings for the online community that we have this year are not going to be comparable to what we have in person, and we have appreciated getting the feedback that you all have discussed. And also as a board, I know we appreciate the availability and the communication that our staff, teachers, and administrators have provided. I think we can all certainly empathize with wanting to keep the communication and the feedback loop going so that we can continue to address and iterate to find, how we can continue to improve. There are going to be some areas that we're just, we're not going to be able to match that in-person experience, but to the extent that we can bridge that gap, I think everybody is interested in doing that. I know that, we read your emails. This is a wonky kind of setup. We don't have, in the public hearing portion, we don't have a dialogue and back and forth, but we read all the emails. We are, always in communication with our board after they meet with your various groups, and whether it's in a one-on-one setting or in a group setting. And so, to just want you to know that you are heard by the board, and to the extent that, your comments are going to the administration, we are hearing that too. And we're taking that all into advisement as we look forward into what the second semester looks like. And, even, as we are here, we're kind of building the boat as we're shipping off into this uncharted water, so to speak. So we appreciate your patience. We know this is not the best of circumstances, but we do appreciate you being patient with us as we try to provide equitable experiences to the best that we can. I don't know if anybody else wanted to touch on that, but in the interest of just addressing that while it's still fresh up here, I think we are all aware that there are definitely some opportunities for improvement in that experience, and we appreciate your time and your sharing your concerns with
Charles, real quick, I'll just say again, we don't usually do this. It's a little strange. It's such an awkward thing hearing of the public because we don't have a back and forth. But I do want, while you're here, and we do want to give you the opportunity to leave. This is what I would say at the end of the night, so I want you to hear it too. But I just wanted to thank the families that have reached out to share their experience with online learning, because this is something new. And I think everybody, the way we talked about this. And so much in this pandemic time is that this is a time for all of us to come together, and every family had tough choices to make about what they did with their learners, whether they're online, whether they're in person, and parents who send their kids into the buildings are making a tough choice and weighing risks, right? And so it's just we really appreciate the opportunity to have that open dialogue, because we are all in this together. So every family is making tough decisions about and weighing risks and benefits and that sort of thing. So it's really good to get that feedback and make sure that we're not missing out on perspectives that can help our families through that. So just wanted to thank you for that.
I also wanted to thank you for coming in, and thank you for sharing your experiences. And it sounds like all of you that's spoken have valuable resources. And like one of you said, you don't know what it's like on your side of the screen. We see what's going on this side. So the real life world experience is so important in making changes and adjusting and adapting to give those students online the best experience that we can. And it's in such an infancy state at this point that we have a lot of room for improvement, and that improvement has to come with your input, because it's invaluable in making decisions, for the future of our online learners. We value those kids and respect your decision to have them learn from home, because it's something I know a lot of people struggled with. So thank you for taking the time to be here tonight, taking the time, to form the Facebook group. And, that only helps the school by sharing that information, gathering that information. It's invaluable to us too. So thank you for being here.
All right. Item number 8 are non-district funded
Gonna do that
positions.
pause, Charles.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, we typically pause at this time in our meeting. We let people get on with their evenings. If you'd like, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the evening. But we generally have some more administrative things to take care of here, so. Just at the bottom there. All right, we are actually not at item 8. We are at item 7, resolutions.
I'll move.
Second.
All right, do I have any discussion?
I'll
Couple,
Can I hit A real quick? Or are you going to
No,
come?
go
Larry? Item A really quick, just a resolution on sub-teacher pay, and I'll let Sean talk to the specifics, but one of the things that we've heard for a long time is that subs are difficult to get outside of a pandemic. And we all know that. And I mean, I know Maria's here. We've talked about that several times. During a pandemic, it's even more difficult. So this is something that is hopefully a proactive effort, and I'll stop there and let Sean talk details on what we're trying to do there.
yeah, so basically this is another tool in our tool belt to help us make sure that we have enough staffing in the building. So what this allows us to do is that we can monitor the data, the absence rates of our staff, and whether or not we're able to fill those absences. And this gives us the ability to temporarily increase the sub pay rate, to pay that premium rate to try to get more staff into the building. Just think of the basic concept of supply and demand. As supply is down, demand goes up. This allows us to increase the price accordingly to try to maybe draw some subs that maybe are at other districts, but maybe entice them to come here so that we can continue to operate and serve our kids.
Thanks, Sean.
The second one, the resolution on the TIF payments. So going back, I mentioned this a little bit in the presentation, but our capital improvement fund has historically been funded by economic development, TIF type revenues. A year ago, not knowing the outcome of the levy, we passed a resolution to shift those revenues into the general fund as kind of a backup plan. Now that we know the outcome of the levy, our more immediate need is I would say back into the capital fund to address the HVAC and parking lots and roofs and things like that for our buildings that are starting to get a little bit older. And so this resolution shifts those revenues back into the capital fund and allows us to address those capital needs going forward.
Thanks, Sean. Any other discussion? Sean, would you call the roll?
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Rio?
Desiree on that?
You, Desiree.
I'll say yes too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're throwing you off with the seating arrangement.
Mrs. Bashy?
3-0 passed anyways. So. All right, item number 8, non-district funded positions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sean?
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Bashy?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 9, certified personnel superintendent's recommendations.
I'm going to ask that if we hold on 9 just for a second, we need to move one item up from the superintendent action steps. There is a job description I'd like to move up so we could vote on that first. So if you're okay with that, to hit pause on 9.
Yeah, we can come back to 9.
We'll come back to 9. Is that
Okay.
okay?
So item number 10, certified personnel additional duties.
Perfect.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sean?
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Ms. Yingling?
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 11, supplemental personnel superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sean?
Mrs. Batchy?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Ms. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 12, resolution for hiring non-certified supplemental personnel superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Sean?
Mr. Galvin,
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling,
Yes.
Mr. Steele,
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy,
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 13, classified personnel superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sean?
Mrs. Yingling,
Yes.
Mr. Steele,
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy,
Yes.
Mr. Galvin,
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 14, classified personnel additional duties. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sean?
Mr. Steele,
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy,
Yes.
Mr. Galvin,
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling,
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 15, new and revised board policies. This is our second reading and adoption of new and revised board policies. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is it a motion to adopt?
Yes.
Yeah. Second.
Any discussion?
I'll just say, I've mentioned this a couple times. I'm not on this committee anymore. The next time, I would appreciate, think about some changes that we make. You know, sometimes we'll make changes to language based on there's a new law that was passed. But if there's no impact on the policy, then it seems to me that there's no reason to change the policy, just to state that there's a law. Like there's the one about the religious liberty thing. And so just, I don't want to take the time or resources of administrators to make a change that somebody else is suggesting when there's really no need to make the change. And there's nothing wrong with any of the changes that are based on those. But if we're just saying it to cite a new law, I'd rather keep it out so we don't have to update that if that law ever changes again. So just something I wanted to raise. So thank you.
Policy
Yeah,
committee.
other turn-ins.
All right, so I think we had a motion and a second, and then that was discussion. Any other discussion? Sean?
Mrs. Batchy,
Yes.
Mr. Galvin,
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling,
Yes.
Mr. Steele,
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 16, action item superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion?
Real quick, can I ask a point of clarification? Is this where you were thinking the creation, the job?
So item C, and I'll discuss that in just a minute.
Okay,
Because
okay.
that is you.
Got it. Yep. Those are okay. So those are some of those substitutes.
Yep,
that-
and then
okay.
we'll jump back
Got
to
it. Okay. So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
So the clarification is on item 9, which we'll go back to our section 9. There are 3 people, I believe, in that section that we're asking to hire for. So this is another example of we're trying to be creative. So we looked at all of our data and we knew that on Fridays at the middle school was a difficult day to get subs and we had some shortage on that day. So we are trying another concept here where we're paying a little bit more for people that are going to commit right now to make sure that they're going to be here on those Fridays. So this will be the second. We actually have 3 things that we've tried now with subs to try to secure them. We have the 4-day commitment subs that we tried on that went on our last, I believe, agenda item. Is that right, Sonia? Shaking her head, yes. We are doing the premium pay concept for any when the high demand hits. And then this is our 3rd creative attempt where we're looking at that data and saying we're going to have 3 people are committing to being here on those Fridays so that we don't have shortages at certain schools.
Yep.
So we're raising pay. So this is a description because we had to put a description for each of those agreements. And so this is the first time we've written that up. So we wanted to adopt that before we actually hire the people.
So to be clear, like there are things that people can see about changes that we're making as a district to deal with the pandemic and
We're trying.
keep people educated. You know, we talked about in public comments about, a big chunk of that, right? A one that affects a lot of people's lives. This is one that might not be on many people's radar, or you might not remember or realize that to keep kids in school, we need to keep adults working in their positions and serving our students and keeping the lights on, keeping the doors open. This is one of the ways that's going to help us do that. The idea is that we'll have more subs when our teachers or other staff have to be out. So just adding a tool to your toolbox of
You're right.
keeping the buildings open and serving.
And
our
we're
students.
super fortunate right now that we do not have any trends or positive cases with staff. We're very grateful for that. But there's other things that cause, like, so a staff member, just because they don't have a positive case, they may have a kid that's quarantined now and their life changes. So that pulls them in different directions. So we're just trying to be proactive now so that we don't run into a situation, because we can't, in the past we had different opportunities where we could do some creative things. That's not as easy anymore with our spacing. And so we're trying to just get ahead of that.
Thanks. Cool. All right. Do I have a motion? Or we had this was discussion.
Yep.
Sorry. Any other discussion? Sean?
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy?
Yes.
4-0.
All right. I believe that it was it section 9 or 10?
It was 9.
Okay. We're going to go back to item number 9, certified personnel superintendent's recommendations. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just making the direct connection, you can see right there are building substitute teachers, 3 of them at the middle school, where we're going to try that attempt. So just so we know right where that shows up.
Great. Thanks, John. Any other discussion? Sean?
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 17, treasurer's report. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a couple things to point out here. One is the 5-year forecast and notes and assumptions. Again, that's we kind of went through some highlights, but if you want to look at the full document, it's either here in board docs or once we approve it, it'll be on the Ohio Department of Education website, which has all the details on there. Second thing I wanted to point out, under the donations section, a couple different things in here. We did receive 8,600 masks, washable masks, and another 18,000 KN95 masks. Most of these coming from Hamilton County ESC. So we appreciate donations. As we talked about earlier, we've had a lot of increase in costs from COVID. So anytime we can get some donations from our partners, we appreciate those. And then also later on the donations, there's $2,000 in donations to Comment Covered. Again, Comment Covered is Casey Moran and her team of the people that have helped supply household items and food for students and families in need. And she's got some nice momentum going there. There's been several people who have donated and continue to donate to that. So we appreciate the donations and the work that they're doing to support our families.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Any other discussion? Sean?
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Batchy?
Yes.
Mr. Galvin?
Yes.
Mrs. Yingling?
Yes.
4-0.
Item number 18, committee reports. Who would like to kick us off? Looks like we had a Arts and Activities Council meeting October 6th.
I was not in attendance at that. Tracy, were you there?
We approved some of the club activities, some additional new opportunities, and they are still doing fall, and all of those are virtual primarily at the high school and middle school.
Thanks, Tracy. Business Advisory Committee, October 7th.
So Business Advisory Committee, we had a Zoom meeting for that as well. We gave an option and Zoom was the preferred method and it was easier. We actually had a great attendance. We walked through some of the things that Sean mentioned today with the 5-year forecast and some of the impacts financially that's had on our district. We also talked a little bit about some of the quarantine. There's a lot of questions about quarantine and what are we doing to creatively solve for some of the concerns at our high school with students being out. So we had a great discussion around that and just some connection around what is that looking like in other people's workplaces and how they're dealing with it. And also shared a little bit about some work that we're doing in terms of advocacy at the state level at that time. So those were some themes that came out of the meeting, and always appreciative of our engagement that we receive from our business partners. They're extremely helpful in the conversation.
Yeah, it was really neat to be able to talk through that aspect with them about how it's impacting their businesses too, because for absolutely our business leaders share with perspectives, and they're great for bouncing ideas and information off of. And those who have kids in the district, it's great to hear their perspective as a business leader and a parent. And this was a different connection to schools in that they and their businesses are also going through this pandemic. And so kind of talking through how the impacts are different for some businesses and then the schools. And so it was a really great conversation. Appreciate their time.
Thanks, Matt and Jonathan. Finance Committee, October 9th, we met via Zoom and in person as well. A lot of the subject matter that you heard tonight at our 5-year forecast and some of the other items that went into that, related to COVID, related to some of our unexpected costs and revenue projections for the year. Sean, was there anything else that you wanted to add from that meeting?
Yeah, no, that was really our main topic, was just kind of going through the details of all those assumptions, and that's really what builds the forecast. So we had a lot of good conversation around the assumptions going in on both the revenue side and the expense side.
All right, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, October 14th.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this. I know we talked about this at an earlier meeting this year, that the district has had the Diversity Council for how many years, Tracy? 15 years or more?
Yeah, since 2004.
Okay, so it was pretty close. So 16 years. It's really exciting to see this, see the council take on a different, sort of a different focus and align more closely with other superintendent committees and the work of those committees and supporting the work that's happening in a specific area in the district. And so if we think about our 3 rocks, DEI, inclusive excellence is one of our 3 big rocks. And so we're really excited to have a dedicated group of community members, diverse themselves in, backgrounds and perspectives and family situations, coming together to do like real work that impacts our inclusive excellence mission as a district. And so I just wanted to share a couple things. The group has sort of adopted a new sort of I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but a mission statement and a purpose for the council. It's a superintendent's committee. Members are ambassadors for our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. They'll help co-create and lead our council's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and provide feedback about the outcomes and execution of the district's inclusive excellence OKRs. And there was a vision for the Diversity Council over the years too. Tracy, what was it before?
I can't repeat the whole thing from 2007, but in summary, it was sort of better together was sort of the tagline from.
Yep. Which at the time served a really good purpose of bringing people together, and that being our focus, and more about celebrating, really the diversity that we live in. I'm really excited that the vision that this group adopted, and it really aligns with the work of the equity and inclusion work in the district, is to empower students, staff, and families to take anti-bias, anti-racist, equitable, and inclusive actions that ensure everyone belongs. So that is right down the center of what we're doing. And so we're really excited to see that group of people do that work and support the work that's happening in the district. So it'll be good to report back on how those conversations go. And what that work will be, and to invite you to be part of it too.
Thanks, Matt. And the last of our committees is the Mason Schools Foundation Committee.
I got the good ones this week to provide updates.
You're all over the court.
So the Mason Schools Foundation, we know, is a key partner always for the district in helping, take us above and beyond and helping our teachers' ideas to do big things in their classrooms and making them possible. Well, this year, like so many other aspects of our lives, the challenge of helping to raise funds in partnership with that group was a challenge. And one of the biggest fundraising opportunities is the gala every year. It's a fun time to come together as a community in person and celebrate and raise paddles and spend a lot of money. And so, going into it, you think, that's a challenge and you budget for it. And while it was sad not to be in the same room as people and to not have the opportunity personally for me to walk around and make people feel bad for not raising their paddles at paddle calls and that sort of thing, I am happy to report that the gala was actually a smashing success this year. The work of the committee that put that together and created a new event, a new experience for our families was just phenomenal. And so just to share a few numbers, that Marsha Wise sent to me from the beach in South Carolina. I'm jealous. Is the net proceeds, so what they're going to take in from this year's gala. Last year it was around $37,500. This year it was $40,000. Wow! So year over year an increase. Last year, wasn't one of the top years, but year over year an increase. That's just incredible.
That's amazing.
And what I'm actually even more excited about than the money is the level of participation. And so. And the foundation is really excited about the opportunity that this presents for engagement going forward too, is that last year, those in attendance at the gala was 245, right around 245 people. So in the room and bidding and having fun. This year, 420 people logged in to either donate or signed in and donated or bid on items. Wow. And so that's incredible. I mean, that's a group of people that I don't think we're going to lose in engagement going forward, because that was a fun event. And so everybody had the chance to watch the video and be part of the experience. And it was really exciting. I know I'm going on, but there's so many really cool opportunities to engage the community that were possible because we weren't in one room. But we were still able to partner with the Manor House and have people buy meals from the Manor House and recognize that partnership and allow people to have that experience. And it was fun because we had the great meal from the the Manor House, but we had to share it with our kids at home. And the video is phenomenal. Thanks to everybody for putting that together, and thanks for everybody for attending. I think it's going to serve them well going forward.
That's great.
Really exciting. So
great news.
Thank you.
All right, item number 19, legislative update.
Yeah, there's a couple things that are happening out there that are worth watching. I know Sean and I watch, I think it's House Bill 305 right now that's being proposed out there at the funding bill, and continuing to see if that moves forward. I don't think a lot will happen for the next couple of weeks, but after that, hopefully maybe we'll see some movement on different pieces. There's also lots of conversation still around testing and accountability, specifically how they're going to use testing to compare schools and hopefully move away from that concept. Report card for the state for each of the districts. How does that look when we have online learners and in-person learners, and then you have some districts that aren't even in person? So there's just a lot of that conversation that's still out there in the legislative ranks out there. And then in terms of just our conversation as a district, we continue to work closely with the governor's office specifically on looking at how we continue to use science and data to look at everything that's related to COVID, specifically with quarantine, but just keeping that conversation alive and ongoing with them, and seeing if that would have any impact on the larger look at how schools are looked at with COVID-19. So
thanks, John.
That's where we are.
Awesome. Item number 20, administrator commentary. Tracy?
Sure. There have just been so many things that have been needed to reimagine this year. We heard some of those things highlighted tonight, which was exciting. It was fun to come into the high school and see it decorated for homecoming, because that's important. And we're in homecoming week. And I love seeing how staff is reimagining that, along with Stugo, an incredible student organization here, strong. And one of the ways that they've engaged online and in-person learners has been through shoebox floats. So something we probably wouldn't have imagined before, but I have gotten the biggest kick out of seeing some of these. So if you haven't looked at them yet, they are going to be featured all throughout the building, but we'll be putting together some things just for our community to showcase that. And then one example that is so amazing, and it's just such an incredible example of kind of students, staff, and families coming together and pouring love into something, is to watch our Mason High School band pull off their moonshot, which was all the work that those students have earned, the directors. I mean, when you think about what Ed Protzman, our director of bands, and Jason Sleppy, the marching band director, what they, from last spring of having a time where in the middle of COVID and saying, no, you can't get together, they did a virtual band camp. Then they did a reveal in a drive-in movie theater for their show reveal. Then they did every dot and having gallons of hand sanitizer and not having one positive case in a group of 240 kids who practiced and worked their tails off all summer long. And as events started canceling across the country and states, a lot of places kind of pulled back. But these students with an army of parent leaders that Mindy Patton would be remiss to not name check specifically, were able to pull something off. And then just a credit to Jonathan, because they knew that they had a leader at the top who was listening at every turn and being an intermediary for them, for the health department who was working hand in hand with them, and for the health department in Indiana who was working with hand in hand. And it was just an unbelievable example of we can do things, even in a pandemic. We can still create moments that are special and significant for kids. And it was just a blessing. So if you haven't gotten to see the show, you can go check it out on the band's YouTube site. It's linked on our Facebook page as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks. Well, I just sort of following on that, we've heard the term adjust and adapt a few times already tonight. And I just wanted to take a few moments to really commend our amazing educators for the ways that they continue to adjust and adapt to meet our learners' many needs. One of the great honors and pleasures of my role is getting to visit our classrooms online and in person, and to see our teachers and our learners in action. And I know we don't all get to have that opportunity as often. And so I just thought I would share just a few little examples they're big though, in terms of, I think, what they represent, the many things our educators are doing that, we just never would have dreamt of a year ago. So you walk around the high school now and you will see webcams in some of our classrooms hanging from the ceiling, among other places, because teachers recognize that that is the way that students who are quarantined at home are going to get the best vantage point and be able to join in on the learning that's happening. I was at MECC the other day, and some of our second graders were so excited to go on a field trip, which field trips are not something that are exactly happening, but those second grade teachers were bound and determined to give students that experience that they always go on this annual field trip as part of their ecology unit. And so they figured out a way to do that as a walking field trip, using MEC's sort of backyard as their field. And the field trip excitement was just the same, as it would have been if they were getting on the buses. In a recent online classroom with one of our fourth grade teachers, it was incredible to see in a period of about 5 minutes, students were engaging and participating through chat, typing, by using Zoom extensions and raising their hand or clapping, by being on a Google Jamboard, by actually speaking and joining the class. And again, if we had said, we're going to have fourth graders all together, in this big group, and they're all going to be interacting and contributing to, a classroom discussion in these ways, I don't know that we could have quite imagined it. And similarly, a middle school classroom, in a middle school online classroom, to see in a social studies classroom, the chat just explode with student contributions. And they weren't in the room, they weren't speaking, but wow, were they having a powerful discussion. And I think probably some students' voices who maybe you wouldn't have heard if it was all speaking. And so I could go on and on with all of these examples of ways our teachers and our students have really risen to this challenge. And we talk about adjust and adapt as one of our R factors, but another one is make a difference, right? Or to create great experiences for others. And so just so thankful for the way our educators are doing that. We know we are always adjusting and adapting. And so grateful also to be able to hear from the experiences this evening from our online families who came, and we look forward to just that opportunity to continue to learn and improve through all of our learners and our staff members and families' experiences.
Thanks, Amy.
This might make a loud squeak. Got better at that.
So from the Human Resource Department, we really are serving in a supportive role currently, trying to support all the other departments. And in our effort to support, we really are trying also to to support our culture guide. And one of the areas that we've been focusing on very specifically is that building meaningful relationships, because we see that that's a real need right now. Our goal has really been to really emphasize the human part of human resources, because the need for personalized services right now is probably greater than it ever has been. And so we're trying to do that through, really showing empathy while trying to problem solve with our staff. And some of the ways that we've talked about today, for example, is, even substitutes. How do we build things around that need that we have for, substitute teachers, evaluating some really unique leave requests this year because, around COVID that we would not have typically had, evaluating some other atypical personnel needs, whether it's covering classrooms or trying to find ways to, in this case, we talked about online learning this year. So we've had some unusual things that we don't typically deal with. Even I've sat in meetings of helping facilitate health management plans for staff. That's not typically something that we do. So we've really just tried to give some extra care and consideration for people and support them. And so in my effort to say thanks, I would like to really thank our administrators and our supervisors who have pointed staff in our direction so that we can, looking out and recognizing those needs and then reaching out to us to make sure that we help close the gap for people.
Thanks, Tanya.
Sorry about that earlier noise as I was dragging it across. So they learned from my error there. Well, we're excited to be back in our Big Rock work. And this year our Big Rock teams are actually evolving. So we've kind of been building our toolkit for the past couple of years. And this year, as I'm helping to lead the culture team. So in our buildings, our culture teams are now starting to merge with our inclusive excellence teams. One of the things that we're focusing on as a culture team is the behavior from our culture guide of respect and encourage each other. And there's nothing more valuable than fusing those two this particular year. And in fact, at Mason Elementary, they've formed a student ambassador group with over 160 students. So they opened it up to anyone. And they've also been very deliberate about making sure online families are included, just as if our in-person learners. So making sure that our teachers as well as our students have opportunities. So they have this student ambassador group called BRAVE, and building relationships and valuing experiences is what it stands for. So these students get to share their experience and help shape the work of our culture and IE team. So it's really back to kind of our model of community sourcing, and we're doing it actually even at the student level. So we're really excited just about the evolution and the iteration that our Big Rock teams are having as we continue through that work. So I anticipate that to continue, and we're excited to see where that takes us.
Thanks, Christine.
Since I've already had the luxury of speaking this evening about our wonderful nutrition department, I'll definitely keep it brief. But I too would like to piggyback off of Tracy's comments about our band department. They started actually before anyone. I think the next runner-up would have been the football season. But that group, led by Ed Protzman, has done an outstanding job. Just the level of sophistication and the parent commitment out of that group is so impressive. I can't say enough about them and what they've done and the excitement they've done for their kids. And I too would like to recognize Jonathan. So many times the superintendent doesn't get recognized for making those connections to make things happen. I know spending time with Marion County and Indiana and also our health department to make that work. I honestly don't think it would have happened if it wasn't for that. So I know all those parents are very appreciative, and those kids will never forget that.
Thanks, Todd.
So Mr. Wise was not able to be here with us tonight, but I wanted to take up his torch when it comes to state funding and the favors that they do us or lack thereof, and a little bit of history. So I know if he was here, he would take us on a walk through the history books and talk about tangible personal property tax and all the effects we've had through all the years.
A winding and scenic walk.
Exactly. He's a wealth of knowledge and understanding when it comes to school funding, and really being on the board. As long as he's been on the board, he's walked through the whole thing from the beginning. But I would be remiss if I didn't again point out the fact that back in 2005, when that TPP law went into effect, we were collecting 7 mills of property taxes from that TPP, and if we still, and that was actually a growing source of revenue as we've had more companies move into the area, that revenue source would have grown. And we really could make the case that, a pretty strong case, that if we had not lost that, we still would not be on the ballot. We still would be looking at sometime in the future of being back on the ballot. And so, and again, as I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the things that the state committed to at the very beginning was that their message was that we're going to change this revenue source. We're going to take away TPP, bring in the CAT tax, collect it at the state level, but we're going to hold schools harmless. So you're not going to lose out. We're going to change it, but you're not going to be any worse off than you are now. Obviously, look where we are now. That did not happen. So I'm sure I did not say that quite as eloquently as Kevin would have, but shout out to him tonight. So
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. And when that 14% left, who took on the burden of that?
Our community did.
Our community did.
That's right.
Okay. That's good. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. Well, I want to give Sean a shout out as well. The word diligent comes to mind, when you think about your budget and all the money that we are gifted and responsible for from our community, and the commitment that our community makes, and just more recently to have a CFO that's diligent with looking at that on a regular basis and keeping our team not just in the loop, but educated enough to know that our decisions actually matter, really means a lot. I don't know that every district has that in their CFO. So I appreciate what you do, Sean, just to, keep us focused on what matters, so that we do it well and we continue to keep the quality, but we do it responsibly to our community. So thank you for your 5-year forecast tonight and showing us how that looks like. I have I've been thinking a lot, because I talk to a lot of people and I get the opportunity to listen to so many people in our community. And that is a privilege, to be able to listen to people in our community. I have had multiple Zoom calls with online families, talk to teachers on multiple occasions about how we're problem solving, and then talk to our administrators about how they need problems that they're working through solved, and then watching our executive team continue to work closely together on a regular basis. And this whole concept of what community is all about, and the whole idea that community does bring people together. And this is a time right now, more than ever in our history, that we must come together, not just as a tagline, but as actual people leaning in to solve some of these things. And I think, Desiree, you said it earlier, we can't do it without the voices from our community. And that doesn't mean, and I never want to oversell the fact that it takes time. So when we hear people, when we hear ideas that are great ideas from our community, we can't just flip those things quickly, but we can start to make plans for the future to be better. And I think that's the value of those conversations. I was on a call last night with, I think, the 16 families that Joy Bennett mentioned, and I appreciate her organizing that to just listen to their experience on the other side of the screen. And what can we do? And one of the things that they brought up was, how do we leverage community conversations to continue to make sure that we are one Mason together? And I love that message of one Mason. I talked to another family this last week, and they were just reminding, and I'm always reminded of this, because I'll get an email at 1 o'clock that says one thing here, and another one at 1:10 that says something way over here, and another one here. And, it's such an interesting time, because we have so many varied perspectives. But just to remind people that are out there possibly watching this, that, there are people in different places, and that's okay. That's what makes our community an amazing place, and to respect the choices that people do make. That's why we gave the choices to have online and in person, and to really look for ways to connect with people, and to respect those choices. So that whole idea of community, and I also want to I'm sure Governor DeWine is probably sitting with his dog right now, watching this right now as we speak, just like we watch him at 2 o'clock. But I want to thank him and his team for engaging in conversation that's really meaningful to us, and not just for Mason students, because we are asking them to partner with us, with Cincinnati Children's, with Ohio State, with other researchers, to look and study our school environments, because if schools are really the safest place for kids for a variety of reasons, and a safe place for our adults. I want to continue that pattern. I want to continue to make this a safe space so that not just Mason students can learn together, because we're a great place, but that schools across the state where there are kids that haven't even connected with their schools have the opportunity to get the resources to be in school if that's a choice that their family wants to make. So I appreciate that partnership that we have at the state level right now, and I hope that that continues to move forward. I think that's all I have to share tonight, so I'll pass it on. Thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. Item number 21 is board commentary. Desiree?
So I think it's interesting in a time of crisis, and it's probably the same for even a marriage or, you know, a corporation, that you really find out how strong you are in a time of crisis, because when things are going great, it's kind of ignorant bliss. So in a time of crisis, you realize how good your leadership is, your support staff, the teachers, the community, and the parents that are willing to give their time to help make things better. And I think that this crisis is a prime example of what Mason's doing. We find out how strong we are, and we're stronger together. Together is better, right? And we make good decisions when the community comes together to share. If you're complaining in your living room, and I understand it's frustrating at times, but change just can't be made unless you reach out to us and give us an opportunity to listen and digest and you know, just compact the information and come up with the best decisions for our school district. So thank you for those who have engaged with the schools, and thanks for all the staff at Mason who have adjusted and adapted in such amazing ways to really make us, I think, a leader in the state as far as moving forward and doing the best we can under the circumstances.
Thanks, Desiree. Matt?
Very quickly, at the risk of just going on and on, the band, phenomenal this year. I was disappointed I couldn't make it to Indianapolis, but I did get to go to the show that they put on at the end of the competition that we hosted with a few schools, and it was incredible. It was so heartwarming to see them have the opportunity to showcase the work that they've been doing for a year, and chills hearing their performance. It got to give a couple of my kids. That was an incredible experience. So congratulations to them. I missed an opportunity to tie two of my reports together tonight between the Mason Schools Foundation Gala and the DEI Council, and to report that anybody who attended knows that there was a specific paddle call in support of our inclusive excellence work in the buildings, and so supporting specific grants for that work. And so we raised a great level of money towards that, and the Schools Foundation has already deployed a grant and approved a grant for an idea at the high school. And so it's just incredible just to see that happening in real time, supporting the work in our buildings, and the shift in focus and attention and different approaches, and making that happen already today. And the dollars of people who support the school's mission and the foundation's mission already at work in that really fantastic way. And then I just wanted to say two quick things. Jonathan and the administrative team, I just want to congratulate you. I know that you know that we know, that we say this, and we feel that we are beyond lucky to have you leading the helm. But I want to make sure that the community knows really what's happening right now in the way that you're all handling our COVID data and taking a look at what's happening in our district, and the health and safety of our students, and in quarantine, and just keeping track of that. There is no outside support for keeping track of this. You'll hear no, you don't hear the federal government talking about tracking it in schools at all. State, you hear about it. You hear about the idea that there's reporting and they put out reports. Well, there is no support. There is no platform. There is no Excel spreadsheets, nothing that schools are given to say, here's how you track it. And like so many other things, Mason found a way and created its own entire platform. And so Jonathan and his team, they're getting calls from literally all over the country asking, how are you doing this? And that's not because they set out to do that, to be a national leader. It's that they wanted to do it with excellence here and do right by our students. And that has turned out to be, as in so many different ways, a source of leadership for outside of our district. And the great thing about that in this moment is that is helping us right now, because it's a good model and it's getting attention in Columbus, and we're showing them data that they don't have and they would not have but for us collecting it and synthesizing it in the way that you are. And so, on behalf of our district, but also students in the state of Ohio and across the country, I thank you all for the work that you're putting into this. It's important work that we all need to have happen right now. So congratulations to you, and just community, we are very lucky to have them at the helm. And then just very quickly, I want to make sure that as we see numbers and, people, the pandemic is not over, and we are looking at the status of it in our buildings and whether there is spread, which we're not seeing evidence of spread, luckily, and the measures that we're taking in the buildings, the great work that we're doing is working. It's working in our buildings, but it's obvious that numbers are growing outside of our buildings. The things that happen in the community are going to come into our buildings because we are part of our community. And so just emphasizing every chance we can, and I'll take the opportunity tonight to just say, we're all in this together, like Jonathan said. And so we know what we're told by the experts to help us try and keep this at bay and come from spreading. And so if we take the measures like wearing our masks and socially distancing, and especially as we come up on the holidays, even Halloween, if we're smart about that and we control the spread in our community, then we control the number of cases in our buildings and therefore the ability to keep our buildings open. And so we are truly all in this together. It's not just the schools, it's our community that needs to help us to do that too. And so I just encourage everybody to do that. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Connie?
Sean, I wanted to thank you for your presentation item on the 5-year forecast. We do pay special attention to it a couple times a year, but it's always there. And from a personal standpoint, I want to thank you for accommodating special requests through the year to help our community understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and that we truly do have an eye on it all year long. And listening to all the wonderful things that are going on in the district, I think it would be a great idea if in recognizing the work that our staff is doing, our students are doing, and our parents, I think we should give everyone a special certification in engineering, because that's really what I see happening. You can't do something the same way you did it for how long. You don't want to give it up, so you find another way to do it. And we're instilling that idea in our families and our staff, each other. We're teaching our students truly lifelong lessons. So that's awesome to see. And the homecoming parade with the shoebox floats, that was a fantastic idea, and the board owes a debt of gratitude to Teresa Kelly and Leslie Turner for making an awesome board float for contributing to that effort. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. I wanted to congratulate the band, echo some of the sentiments we heard earlier. It was an awesome performance to watch and see, especially an activity like that where there's a lot of exhaling, a lot of breathing, a lot of moving around within, close proximity to one another. The fact that they were able to avoid a positive test all season is just amazing. And kudos, well-deserved culmination of their efforts this past weekend. Also want to wish good luck to our remaining fall sports teams that are still in the hunt. Both boys and girls soccer teams, girls soccer playing tonight. I think they've probably wrapped up by now.
They just won.
Awesome. Hey, breaking news.
Just breaking news right now.
Breaking news. This is, if you're streaming this
That's right.
at home.
Now you can go switch over to this. They're planning.
You heard it here.
Mike and Fran, DeWine at home with the dog. I know you guys are interested. Comets are still alive. Cross country as well. And then also wanted to encourage those of you who have not gotten out to vote, make a plan, get out to the Board of Elections between now and next Tuesday. If you have not already. There are 9 issues on the ballot in Mason that impact our schools, and we've got some information about that on our website. I know our administration would be happy to talk to anybody. I know our board members would also be happy to talk to anybody who has questions on those. Those initiatives were not put on the ballot by any action of the school board. We've gotten a couple questions about that, and we've tried to address that to the best that we are able. But just to clarify that for any confusion that's in the community, those are not issues that the board put on the ballot. So encourage everybody get out and vote next Tuesday if you have not already done so, and in fact go out and vote early if you can. And then aside from that, I would say what we've been doing in the schools is bearing out in the data that we're collecting. We hear trust science and trust data, trust health experts a lot. And the experts so far have proven to be pretty on point with their recommendations for wearing masks, for washing your hands, for keeping a distance, for keeping barriers when you can. And we're seeing that in our numbers. It's looking like there's a lower positivity rate and much lower transmission rate in our school walls than there is in the broader community, and specifically the 45040 community. So hopefully the practices that we have implemented here can be continued to be implemented in our broader community, but also those practices can help inform our policymakers, our health experts, and get us to a place that we are still taking the precautions necessary without overkill and doing unintended harm and damage to our kids and our families, by keeping them out of school for too long, or doing other things that sort of robs them of some of the activities that they may otherwise be able to participate in. But we've been really pleased so far with the low rate of transmission and spread that we've seen in our classrooms. And we will continue to adjust and adapt as we see the need based on the information that we have. So with that, I will move for item number 22, adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep. Thanks, everybody.